Welcome to The Girlfriend God, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine, bringing you an equal mix of academic research and emotional spiritual experience. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to subscribe, follow, rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. Now, together, let's find the divine. Okay, welcome to episode 44 with Jennifer Way. Jennifer Way has been an empathic intuitive since childhood, with an acute awareness of the vibrations, inner emotions, and energies of people around her. She's made a career out of honoring the divine feminine and guiding people to use their intuition. She is an intuitive coach, an HR consultant, an Akashic Records reader, an integrative somatic trauma therapy certified Reiki practitioner, and the founder of Hathor Communications, a production company combining all of her skills and passions. She's also the host of the Self-Consciousness podcast and the creator of Sacred Comedy and the Sacred Comedy podcast, which began as an intuitive download while studying the Akashic Records in 2019. Sacred Comedy embodies ancient practices in which ritual and ceremony were infused with laughter, laughing priestesses to be exact, and Jennifer has made the connection between spirituality and comedic performance and brought both to live show performances. All of your links and how people can contact you, work with you, find you, learn about Sacred Comedy, all of those are in the show notes. So, Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's great to be here.
So, there are so many things that I want to talk about. But first, what's your elevator pitch for Sacred Comedy when people say, Sacred Comedy? What the fuck is that?
Yeah. Sacred Comedy is a way to return entertainment and performance to a sacred state. I believe that comedy, this isn't the elevator pitch. This is me just expounding because I'm a Gemini and I talk a lot.
Okay.
It's a way for people to experience stand-up comedy in a way that is more healing than kind of how we think of comedy right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, tell me about this intuitive download while studying the Akashic Records that
Yeah.
led to Sacred Comedy.
Yeah, well, there had been a lot of like little things over the years. I started making content around 2020. So I did a YouTube channel and I was just doing sort of like weekly videos. I was focusing on the idea of laughter and how it can bring people out of a lower vibrational frequency of mood or experience. And it's the quickest way to push through the membrane that separates the lower vibrational frequency and the higher vibrational frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that as sort of some wisdom, some intuition. I did a lot of writing and sort of asking and channeling to get that kind of information. And that sort of stuck with me. And then when I was studying to become an Akashic Records reader, I had a vision of priestesses that were standing outside of a temple. And I could see them in their robes. It was so quick, as these things often are. And they were all they were preparing for something or some kind of celebration or ritual. And I could see the columns, I could see it all. And they were just dying laughing. And I was just like, this doesn't go with what I think of ancient priestesses. Like this is
Right.
this doesn't connect for me, not in my brain. So I was like, what is this? And the answer came back so strong, like, you guys need to like relax. Like, of course there were people with senses of humor in ancient Egypt. Of course, humor had to be a part of being human. And it's always been that way. Why
Right.
would you think that this just happened? Like with
Right.
the event of like with the, like with vaudeville, like, it didn't start that way. It didn't start even with like, poems, ancient poems. I mean, it's always a through line for everything. And the message was very clear that humans especially right now with the oversaturation of healers and
Yeah.
influencer slash wellness slash guru slash healer, teacher, spiritual, whatever, TikTok, blah. Um, we got to stop taking it so seriously.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be that way.
Right.
And I had also started the self consciousness podcast, and I was getting to know stand-up comedians who were also interested in the paranormal. Karen Rontowski is a big, I'm just going to give a big shout out to Karen Rontowski and Jessa Reed. They were stand-up comics, and they both sort of deal with spiritual, esoteric, paranormal topics. And I just thought, wouldn't it be great to experience comedy in a way that is a little bit more warm and engaging and
Mhm.
less, being drunk in the basement bar, with potty humor. so so sacred comedy became this thing that it was about me really bringing mostly female comedians. Um, we welcome everyone, but I do focus on women identifying comics, to bring that voice forward because I feel, and I will, I really dig my heels into this, that female comedians are the new healers and that comedy is a healing art that we should treat as so.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with the other woman, but I will look into her. But I have to tell you, I have followed Jessica Reed for years.
Yeah.
And the Awakening Orientation Department, the
Yeah.
Awakening OG, is one of my favorite podcasts that I've ever listened to. I belong to
She's
her
amazing.
Patreon, and yeah,
Yeah.
she is a delight.
She is. And she brings it across in just it, and it disarms you. And that's how we get people to open up. That's how we get people to look within. Why is
Right,
this funny?
right,
Why
right,
is this funny?
right, right. It's
Such a
kind of
great,
like so. Um, so I myself, and I've kind of outed myself on the show before that I'm in 12-step recovery and have been for a long time, and we certainly have an element of that, right? Like amongst ourselves, we laugh at things that other people would find horrifying.
Mhm.
But we see the ridiculousness and the insanity of our behavior, and we can laugh at it. And we have something called Rule 62, which is to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
So it's
I didn't know
refreshing
that. I
to
love that.
see that in a spiritual uh slant because we do tend to take it much too seriously. We take ourselves too seriously. We take our spirituality too seriously. At
Mhm.
times, I know that I do, right? Like, I feel like if I'm not, I don't know, stoic about my dedication and my reverence, that I'm somehow doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But in one of the many things that I've explored on this show, in Filianism, in their quote unquote scripture, they talk about their creation story is that the goddess laughed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ah, feels so right.
Yeah, it really does. It really
Yeah,
does. Because you can't, I mean, yeah, we need it. We
we need
definitely
it.
need it.
We need it.
So I'm curious if, so the comics that you work with, how do you how do you find them? Do they come to you? Have
Yeah.
you ever had a traditional comic show interest in what you do?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So 2023 was the year that I started the comedy shows. And I've actually put the live comedy shows on pause because I was doing them every month, or at least trying to do them every month with a couple
Mhm.
of months off, like during the summer. Listen, I don't know anything about the comedy. I didn't know anything about the comedy business. I come out of nowhere and I'm not a performer. I'm not a comedian. I'm just a healer who happened to have gone to school for television production and had this desire to be a TV producer in my younger days, like 20 years
Uh-huh.
ago.
Right.
And I come out of nowhere and I'm like, I'm going to produce a comedy show because that's what I do. Like, that's what
Yeah.
I am now. And in Jersey City, where I live, I discovered. I mean, I wasn't the first to discover it, but there was a large budding comedy scene that surprised me because I'd lived here for about 15 years. I moved here to raise my kids with my husband, and I wasn't going out at
Hmm.
all. And I remembered that I loved going out before
Hmm.
all that's part of my life, and I
Right.
loved going to comedy. I and looking back, there were a lot of indicators that I was moving towards comedy, and then I got like taken out of that path, just like a couple of ways. And then when I started in the fall of 2022 when I decided I was going to just put on a comedy show. Originally, I wanted it to be a big festival. I wanted comedy, I wanted stand-ups, I wanted healers, I wanted shamans, I wanted everyone, people selling crystals. I wanted the whole thing. But as I started going down that path, I just found that it was very difficult, especially in Jersey City. There's a lot of politics and stuff
Right.
to be able to the space that I wanted to, getting the permits, all that stuff. I was like, you know what? Let me just put on a small show and let me figure it out that way. So
Right.
through through the network, starting to just go to comedy shows locally and realizing there were so many comedians that lived here because in the tri-state area, so New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, you've
Right.
got a huge comedy scene and you've got people crossing the border all the time and they're doing their rounds, getting shows, doing open mics, things like that all
Right.
around the tri-state area. So I started to meet like comedians that lived here, and then I remember the first show that I went to, I actually ended up getting COVID that night. Should have known. It was in the basement of a bar and it was dingy. And it was produced by this amazing guy in Jersey City named Alex Grubert, who's a great comedy producer and a stand-up himself. Um, and there were like 10 dudes just going up and talking about crap. And I was like, wow. Didn't laugh at all. And then this woman, Madeline Murphy Smith, came up and she rocked the whole room as soon as she got up there. They had 10 minutes each. And I was like, oh my God, this woman is amazing. This is who I want on my show. You can tell she's a professional. There
Hmm.
was no nervousness. I mean, she'd been doing comedy for 10 years and
Hmm.
she was alongside people that didn't deserve to be alongside her. And so
Right.
I got in touch with Alex, I got in touch with her. And then through them, I was like, tell me all the comedians you think I should. And, although I hate Instagram and I really hate Instagram, I was able to, through Instagram, through the recommendations, look at reels of comedians who they recommended I bring onto the show
Hmm.
once I explained to them what I was doing. I found a great venue for it in Jersey City called SIP Studios. The guy who runs SIP Studios was amazing and open and actually very spiritual. His grandmother was a seer. So for him, it was like, yeah, I want this in my space.
Yeah.
So he helped really co-produce that show, and we did all of our shows out of SIP Studios. And then it was just so easy to get to know the comedians that were in the neighborhood and also have them recommend more. So that's kind of how, and then I just fell in love with all of these people because they're hilarious. It's really fun to hang out with them.
I bet.
And it was just such a lively scene. It still is. And I think for me, I needed to take a pause on the shows because I was just losing a lot of money. We were not
Right.
a bar. And unfortunately, the comedy business is about selling drinks and selling food, and we had neither at this space. So
Right.
it was 90% of the work that I did last year was promotion and
Hmm.
marketing, which is the bane of my existence.
Right.
So
I totally understand that. I really do.
yeah.
I
You know,
hate
I'm
being on
I'm
social
almost 50.
media.
I'm like, I don't want to do this shit. I'm like
Right.
standing outside of the train station handing out flyers, I'm like,
Right. Right.
I have teenagers like running to old parents I knew. I was like, oh, this sucks. There's got to be a different way. So this is the year of more focusing on the podcast and just taking a step back and planning new events that are going to be slightly different, but not monthly.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
So I have a suggestion for you
Yeah, please.
because somebody made this suggestion to me and it hasn't begun yet, but I reached out to the university and the College of Communications and Media and am going to be getting a list of unpaid interns who I can hand things to and say, here's my Instagram login and password. Here's
Yeah.
my, you know what I mean? and they
Yeah.
can do analytics research and they can do all that. And I don't have to pay
Oh, yeah.
anybody to do it
Oh,
because they're
yeah.
doing it for class credit. So,
That's awesome. I had a couple of people helping me and
mhm,
I built up a pretty good following. I learned a lot. And I did have someone who was helping me who was a comic, but who was also just helping me out with marketing and stuff. And then I built up quite a following. I will say it was even more stressful because the people that
yeah,
were helping me were coming up with things in a way that I wouldn't have done it. So that I
right,
didn't like. So I
right.
was like, well, this is my show. And then I actually just a couple of weeks ago uh got scammed on Instagram and then
Mm.
I got hacked and I lost everything. So I had like 1,400 followers and it's all gone. And
And
it was
social media.
okay. Yeah, it was okay because it was really actually I have an episode coming out next week about this. It really was a blessing in disguise. My guidance system, my personal guidance system, which is how I refer to my guides. Of course, a blue jay just flew up right into my view. Whatever, my spirit guides, my animals, whatever,
Hi.
my body. Hello. My personal guidance system, my PGS was like, your energy would be better served elsewhere. And I was like, I know.
Oh, PGS. I
So
like that. I'm going to
yeah.
use that if that's all
Yeah,
right.
please, please. It's important because I think a lot of people, there are spirit guides who are helping you. Everyone has a team of spirits. Everyone has a
Yes,
team of even ancestors that are coming through. You have
right,
so many people on the other side, which is not really anywhere other than right here.
right,
And they're constantly communicating with you. And your body is also communicating with you because there's consciousness in every cell of your body. So learning how to decipher through that when I'm training people, I'm like, you know what, just call it your PGS right now because people get obsessed with like wanting to see who their guides are. And guides have even said to me, well, ask them why they need to see us so badly. They need to reflect on why you need to see what we look like.
right,
So,
right,
I use that word to just encompass all of it because it's also my higher self. Um,
right, right,
yeah,
right. And like in my spiritual belief system, all of that, because there's a whole army behind me at any given moment, and I know
yeah,
that. And like you just said, for a while I was obsessed. I was like, I want to know who I'm talking to,
yeah.
where they're at in my
It's
lineage, and
important.
but it
Yeah,
stopped. I mean, I know a little,
yeah.
like I know the people that have died in this lifetime, but I came to realize that there are so many, and we've been here so many times I
Hmm.
couldn't possibly know them all. Like I would, they could walk through my front door and I'd be like, "Who are you?" You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
I agree, and I
And
think it's a really wonderful opportunity and exercise to get to know how these voices make you feel. Because there is something also there is an important reason to know who you're talking to because sometimes you could be talking to something that doesn't have the best intentions for you, and
right,
there really are entities that are looking to siphon your energy. So learning the difference is very important, especially if you're on a shamanic path because there's tons of lower frequency beings. There's tons of
right,
without the best intentions. They really are looking to, there's this big movement on like narcissists. Spot them narcissists, and you see all these people and doctors going on talk shows all over them. Like, wow, they're making a lot of money having everyone focus on them, talk about narcissists and villainizing narcissists and I'm like, doesn't anyone like make that connection? But anyway, I think of them as like narcissists. They are sort of narcissist entities. So
right,
they're not coming from a place of love or
right,
unconditional
right,
love. But everything at its formation comes from a yes. Everything comes from a love place.
right,
And then the corruption happens after.
right,
So, behind the darkness, there's always going to be something lighter.
right,
But
right. Absolutely.
but I'm just saying that it is valid to want to know who you're talking to because sometimes you might be talking to someone you don't want to talk to. And when in the
Right,
beginning,
right.
when you're practicing your psychic awareness and opening up your abilities, it is important to understand the difference.
So I have a friend who's a medium, Celeste Elliott. She's been on the show, And whenever I have had it, it's ironic because and I these are the things I have a sense of humor about in my spiritual life.
Yeah.
So I'm on this very goddess-centered divine feminine path, and I am
Love it.
dedicated and I am religious about it and all of that. And yet, every time I have a session, almost every time with Celeste, the ancestors that come through are always male.
Oh, wow. That's
But
great though, in a way.
it is, it
Yeah.
is. I see the irony of that, and I'm
Yeah.
like, really? Like,
Yeah, and listen, I'm married to a man and I have a son. And I went through a big Sekhmet phase of wanting to burn every male I saw. I remember the night before Trump became president when he
uh,
was running against Hillary. I remember thinking, like, I can't wait for a woman president. I'm gonna walk down the street with a bat and just be like, yeah, say it again. I couldn't wait. I was like, let me beat every man. And this is just a side note because I was like, oh, I would love to mention this on your show. Is there's a show I just watched on Amazon Prime or a movie called No Men Beyond This Point. It's a
nice,
comedy. It's like a mockumentary about what would have happened if women stopped needing male insemination to reproduce. And so
nice.
the documentary just shows like the unfolding of events since that happened in like 1953. It's hilarious. It's really funny.
It
But
sounds like it.
yeah.
I love mockumentaries.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, they're
I was
great.
playing it for my 13-year-old son. He didn't think it was too funny, but I was like, you need to know this stuff. Anyway, I like to jump around in topics, so I'm sure we are off topic. The initial one that you were,
Oh, that is
yeah.
okay. That is very much the nature of this show. We start a conversation and
uh,
are never really sure where we're going to wind
yeah.
up.
That's
So,
great. It's chaos. That's divine feminine, right?
yes, yes, it's
Uh,
ordered. It's somewhat ordered chaos, but
yeah.
chaos nonetheless. Um, so when did you develop an interest in, how do I want to phrase that? When did you decide that being an intuitive coach was the direction that you were taking from your, I
Yeah.
believe you said your useless degree
Yeah. Little
to this,
bitterness.
to where you are now?
Yeah. I've always been seeking answers. I've always been weird. I've always been imaginary friends, playing in nature,
Mhm.
building forts, adopting worms. I don't know, just very weird things. I was that weird child. I was a very sensitive child as a kid, which was something that I hated. I hated that label because my mom would sort of I could hear her talk to like other kids' parents whenever there
Mhm.
was like an issue, and I would just burst out into tears. So, as a very sort of sensitive and impressionable kid, I had a wild imagination, and I didn't really assume that was anything other than what I was told. This is
Right.
late 70s, early 80s. I remember my aunt had a book about the paranormal and all things related to like miracles and saints and things like that. And I actually just found it in her house the other day or the other month. And I was really always interested in those kinds of things. Unfortunately, whatever I could get my hands on when I was younger was very much like, unsolved mysteries, Bigfoot and things that were
Right, right,
just super scary.
right.
So there wasn't really a nice way to kind of enter into that. Fast forward into, and I always went to psychics. I always thought it was
Mhm.
fun. I thought it was weird and I was skeptical, but the skeptic mind wall was very much a programmed skepticism.
Right.
So, um, I think in 2015 or so, I was burnt out at my job. Surprise, surprise, New York City. And I needed to take a break. So I started just going to like YouTube school because a friend I'd gone shopping at a crystal shop with a friend who I thought was very kooky. And she would talk to me about all this kind of stuff. And I was like, she's weird, but okay, I'll like get into it a little. And I remember going to this crystal shop and finding like a huge piece of selenite. And I was like, what does this do? So I went online to search what selenite did. And what it said was, it's very helpful for channeling. And I was like,
Right.
what's channeling? So then I looked up channeling. That's where everything just started for me. I
Mhm.
fell in love with people I would watch channel. I was just like, there's no way, like I was trying to find how this was possible. And I was very curious about that and really trying to not prove it wrong, but I was like, if this is real, this is the most amazing discovery ever. And why isn't everyone doing it? So I dove right in. I got super weird. I found an intuitive coaching like mentorship program. And a lot of those things came intuitively. Like it was like intuitive coach mentorship.
Right.
I started following like the Teal Swans of the world. I started following a psychic named Gigi Young, who has an amazing sort of esoteric, almost like academic esoteric channel as well on YouTube. And a couple of other psychics who have since become good friends of mine. And I dove right in. I stopped actually calling myself a coach. I started calling myself an intuitive consultant because I didn't like the word coach. It felt a little
Yeah, I don't
icky
like it either.
with even though technically that's what I was trained in. So I learned sort of now when I look back at it, it was a lot of like shamanic tools that were just kind of like
Right.
reformulated. And then I started doing channeling myself. Um, and I started doing this while I was working a full-time job, and I just opened up the consultancy. I got trained in Jikiden Reiki, which was super fun. I still do that. And Jikiden Reiki is the Eastern lineage from directly from Japan. So as a Jikiden Reiki healer, I'm sixth generation. When you go to like the people who are getting like trained over a weekend in Usui Reiki, that's
Mhm.
more of the Western sort of delineation of it, and that's like a further generation. But the Jigiden Reiki was like a rediscovered lineage from the original teacher, and it's the kind of Reiki where you're not supposed to touch anyone for like a year because
Mhm.
you really have to start practicing your. So people are like, "Why didn't you ever become a master?" And I was like, "Because I'm not." Like I'm not going to teach Reiki to other people, and the
Right.
master for Jigiden Reiki is much longer and much more intense, but
Mhm.
it's like everyone's a master now. I don't know if you realize that.
Right.
And I shouldn't put it down or anything, but I was like, I know that I don't need to be a master in order to
Right.
perform the Reiki. I
Right.
actually I'm second generation. Now, this was what I'll say. My great grandmother was a healer. She was from Saleh, Morocco, which was a colony of Jews. So I come from Jewish background. And she was blonde hair, blue eyed. Um, the indigenous people of Morocco are known as Amazigh. They used to be called Berber, but they don't use that word anymore. A lot of Berbers were also Jewish. They were, hundreds of thousands of years, they all sort of mixed up in there. I
Right.
believe that my background is Berber, Amazigh. Because of things that I know about my family, because of the kinds of things that rituals she used to do. So I've kind of done my own work to identify that that is something that runs in my blood as well.
Mhm.
And that, even though I asked my dad, I'm like, what was your grandmother like? He's like, I don't know. I think we're Spanish. I'm like, we're not Spanish Jews. Like, if we were Spanish Jews, we would know. Like, that would be my last name literally is a Berber word. My last name is Bohbot, which is Bohbot. And it's translated from Berber as man with a big belly. Basically, my last name means chubby, which is true. So, so that's also part of it. That's why I'm like, I don't need to, it costs a lot of money to get all these certifications.
Right. Right.
I did do some shamanic training as well through the last Mask Center, which was really great as well. And I just kind of kept doing trainings, and I ended up leaving corporate America because it was eating my soul and kind of destroying me. So 2018 was my year of that,
Mhm.
where I left that job under very bad circumstances, and then lost my mother in the same year.
I'm so sorry.
So thank you. So So yeah, so I started just really laying the foundation down for this practice around that time, and then like COVID hit, and it was actually a good timing for that. Um, so yeah, that's I'm not sure if that answered your question, but there it is.
So back to sacred comedy for a
Yeah.
moment. Um, I'm curious if you, because I know you do live shows, but do you only do live shows locally, or do you tour, or are you planning on touring?
So I think tours are in the future, but I right now financially, it's got to be viable. So
Right.
this is a year of building the brand up a little bit more through the podcast. I will be planning sporadic performances in Jersey City.
Hmm.
One of the newer developments in my life is that I got a job working at a vegan cafe in my town. Because I was like, I'm not going back into the office world because I've got
Right.
like two colleges to pay for at this point, and
Right.
the sessions were not doing it. So I started working at this cafe, and we're going to be doing events. This is actually the first time I spoke about it. We're going to be doing events there.
Hmm.
And we're actually going to incorporate food as well. So,
Nice.
but the performances, so if anyone is in the tri-state area, Jersey City is pretty central. We're very close to New York City, Manhattan. And the new location where we're going to be doing this is very easy to get to if you're coming from New York City. And we're going to basically, I'm developing a program where it's sort of stand up, but I've met so many female healers who are also stand ups. There's so
Hmm.
many who I adore, and they're all on my podcast. Everybody, go see the
Hmm.
Sacred Comedy podcast. And they're going to be coming on to do a combo teaching, healing, stand up performance slash workshop. So I kind of want to move away from traditional comedy as a business.
Right.
But I do want it to be sustainable so that I can pay the comedians what they
Right.
deserve.
Right.
Because that's a whole nother aspect of the comedy business is that they don't get paid.
Right.
So,
Right.
so yeah, that's why they have all these other jobs.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to, as it grows. I bet there are comics out there that don't fall under spiritual but would like to.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Yeah, we have a lot
Um,
of comedians who are not spiritual comedy like
right.
comedians. And usually when I have a relationship with or have had them on the show like non-spiritual comedians, I'll
Hmm.
bring them onto the podcast and we'll have one of the spiritual comedians. We sort of bring comedians onto the show for a healing experience. So whether
Right.
they get a tarot reading or a psychic reading from one of the comedians who's also like a psychic or
Uh-huh.
also a tarot reader or also an astrologer. So we're sort of just kind of mashing it together
Right.
on the podcast.
You
Yeah.
definitely have a you definitely have a market on this niche because you're doing something that
I
no one
hope
else is
so.
doing,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Which has a lot of potential.
it does have a lot of potential, but I will say watching especially my friend Karen Rontowski, Karen is an amazing comedian. She's been doing stand up for 30 years. She is the ultimate professional. I remember we had her perform at our second show last year, and we had some of the younger comics who I was good friends with, these younger guy comics. And she came in, they were like, "Who is that? She is amazing." I'm like, "Yeah, because she's been doing it for 30 years. She
Right.
should be way bigger." But
Right.
as we found out when, we had our presidential, people don't really love, like, people don't want to see women. And people are opening up to female comedy,
Right.
but there's other aspects about female comics that kind of have to be in place. And I don't want to say it, but I think you can, infer what I'm saying. It's like there has to be a certain look. There has to be a certain, not all the time, and there's definitely people who are breaking out, but, so if you're doing a mostly female thing and then you're adding woo to it, people are extremely resistant. And
Right.
I will say the reality of this year of shows last year showed me that people are a little scared of it
Hmm.
because they don't understand what it is. And they don't understand what it is because it's out of their framework of what comedy should be,
Right.
because there is no alcohol. How am I going to sit down and listen to comedy where there's no alcohol?
Right.
Alcohol is, and listen, I'm not here alcohol is important for celebration and things like that, but we live in an extremely alcoholic culture where it's
Yes.
so accepted. I mean, you coming from a program, it's like it is so accepted in our culture as part of what you need to relax that I was really on a mission to have a sober event, which was
Mm.
another aspect of it that was strange for people. Like unless there was a marketing tie-in like, oh, dry January. We had sold
Right.
out shows in January. Then as the months went on, we had less and less ticket sales.
Right.
We canceled 2 shows because there were literally no ticket sales. And it was almost impossible getting people to come. We served tea and we did meditation between sets. So the people who were there and the people who had the experience of the show were like, this is amazing. But I was having trouble finding those people who were interested in wellness, people who didn't want to get wasted, people who wanted to engage, people who wanted to, we would have activities, we had had fruit. We had a market there. We
Right.
tried all different things, but I also have a friend who's a stand-up and a psychic, and she does a show where she does both and she reads for the audience.
Hmm.
And she's like, the world isn't ready for this yet.
Mm.
And that was my experience last year. And I was bitter for a long time,
Yeah.
and that had its place. I needed to be. So right now it's just about figuring out how to really get to people in a way. And I think the brand just has to be kind of built up. People need to be a little bit more familiar with it first, because
Right.
I am starting something new that
Right.
they don't understand. I mean, there are people who do this. Like again, she does something called psychic stand up, where she will sit on the stage and she reads tarot and she works it into crowd work expertly. So she has been integrating it into her performance. And you know, she's doing it.
Right.
She's
Right.
a successful comedian. She's actually living her dream and she's traveling and but it's kind of unrelenting. And the entertainment industry has a lot of gatekeepers. And even though it's become more accessible, where you have social media and people are able to express themselves and find audiences, the masses are now the artists. So
Right.
it is a bit oversaturated. So how crazy do big question this year is like, how crazy do I want to get pushing this into people's faces?
Right.
Um, and I think I'm coming to this conclusion that I want to build this slowly. I want to build a sort of temple of priestesses, and those priestesses being the female comics that I know and adore in the New York City area. And I want to bring them into healing circles where we make this shit happen in a more magical way.
Right.
Um, because the industry, the business is unforgiving and it is not ready for divine feminine yet. It's just not.
I
And
get
I
that.
I hate to say that. It's no criticism of divine feminine. I'm all divine feminine,
Right.
but right now it has to make sense for people, and people have been very lulled into a sense of um comfort and expectation. If it's something that doesn't fit in their box, and the words, people say, oh, it's outside the box, and we have all of these words to describe it, but the experience of it, people are still here. Like they're just not, because they're in a people are also in a place of healing themselves.
Right.
So having an entertainment show that could be good for their well-being at the same time, it's not in the realm of where they're at yet. They're like just getting their heads wrapped around sound baths. And
Right.
people are charging $60 to go to a sound bath,
They
right?
are
People are
indeed.
charging $60 to go to a sound bath. I was charging 30, maybe $35 for our night. And I had people saying, it's just too expensive for comedy. And I was like, wow, this is really court jester stuff we're coming up against. Hundreds and
Right,
hundreds of years of looking at the comedian as not a heel, like as a just throwaway thing.
right.
So you're, so I'm coming up against a lot of things. Again, I'm not saying I'm not up for it, but the reality is, it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. Yeah.
Um, I wonder if, I wonder, and I don't know how you would go about this, if you could make inroads into the recovery community, because I have been to conferences where they
I'd
have
love to.
12-step comedians.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's been part of the programming. So
Yeah.
it's out there.
It's out there. I would love to. So I've been looking at rehabilitation centers, physical therapy, things like that. I've been like basically promoting this as a corporate wellness program as well. So
Hmm.
trying to find a more sustainable, like financially sustainable, meaning I
Hmm.
need to be able to pay myself. I need to be able to pay these performers
Right,
and for their time and for their energy. So it has to be that sort of like viable thing.
right.
And there's grants and things like that, but
Mhm.
um, I've just been my energy right now going into the podcast and also like working as a waitress and then also being a mom, like a primary caregiver.
Right.
It's been yeah, it's been a little difficult. So, but that I would love to get into. I mean, I've been trying to get into like women's shelters and
Hmm.
things like that, but there's so much red tape around it
Right.
that unless I'm like banging on their door like this, like I got to go through the Archdiocese of Newark to be able to go to this women's shelter. And I'm like, I just want to make them laugh. I just want to give them an experience of healing and all these things. So that is definitely part of the plan to bring it to healing spaces, even potentially hospitals. But I'm finding even getting to these people and
Hmm.
trying to explain what it is has been a challenge. Again, not a challenge I'm not up for, but it's been it's been a challenge.
It would be great to have comedy, to have sacred comedy in a rehab.
I would love it. I
I
would
mean, I
absolutely love
myself
it.
never went to rehab, but from what I hear about it, it could use a little levity. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And I have comedians who are recovering alcohol or recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics. I have comedians who are psychotherapists. And like it's happening out there. And
Right.
I feel like yeah, it's
Well,
that
and
would be
some of
amazing.
these,
And I'm open
since,
to that. Anyone listening,
right.
if you want to bring us, I'm more than happy to make that a thing.
Well, and I think part of that phenomenon has happened because uh, more famous mainstream comedians are bringing their own experiences of recovery into their act. Like
Yeah.
the person that came to mind was we just watched the newer John Mulaney special on, and he talks about
Yes.
going to rehab and,
Yeah.
and nobody recognizing him and you know what I
Yeah, I
mean? So
love that. I
and
loved that
and I've heard
special.
other comedians talk about that too,
Yeah.
that that experience. So because sober is the new black and has
Yeah.
been in celebrity circles for a long time now, which is both good and bad,
Yeah.
right?
No, but it's
Um,
true.
Plus we
It's
have the
true.
whole anonymity thing. So,
Yeah, well, there's that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the fact that the fact that I think people are understanding that comedy doesn't have to come from such an unhealed, wounded place because you've
right.
got a lot of wounded comics. It's where you come
Yes.
from. It's where you come from to find the comedy. We had Ophira Eisenberg on our podcast recently, and she was doing she was being read by one of our psychics, and the psychic goes, was your mom, because she was bringing in her parents who had passed over, and she's like, was your mom critical? She's like, I could just ask, are you Jewish? But was your mom critical? And she's like, no, my mom was very supportive. That's why I went into stand-up comedy. It's like, yeah, there you
Right.
go. But
Well,
I think
most
yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, anybody that's in any kind of performance, right? There's a lot of wounded comics, there's a lot of wounded
Yeah.
musicians and artists and
Actors. Yep.
writers, and I myself am a writer, so
Oh yeah.
I get that the whole
Yeah.
purpose of existential pain is fuel, right?
Yeah.
It's
And
fuel.
there is a worry or a concern that if I start healing myself, I won't be funny anymore.
Right,
But what
right.
we
I,
are
I went through,
exploring,
I'm not going to be able to
yeah,
write anymore,
yeah. I mean,
but I
what
still
we're
do.
exploring is like you actually have a better chance of more writing, more being more funny because now your perspective is more expansive and
Right,
you know what it's like to be here and you know what it's like to be here. So
right,
you can come from a place of seeing it all, knowing it all, experiencing it all, and finding the compassion for all of those parts of yourself, henceforth all of the ways people can see their own reflection in the work that you're doing.
right,
And that's the
right,
whole purpose is for your people to engage with you, your reader, your listeners to this podcast, anyone who goes to a comedy show, it's to allow them space to reflect and to see something that they can connect to
right.
and feel more compassionate towards themselves without really being directly like, you should feel more compassion to yourself. It's like a backdoor way to
Right.
get people off, off their game, off balance a little to be more relaxed. I mean, think about how many times you've laughed so hard you started to cry,
Uh-huh.
or that you've cried so hard you started to laugh.
Uh-huh.
Because those kinds of releases are so important to being
Right.
a human being. And we are finally, and this you can see evident everywhere in all of our movies and all of our TV. Feelings are not being thrown away anymore. Feelings are actually being pushed up front. People tend to stay in feelings too much at this point. But
Right.
when I was growing up, the I always joke that song by Crystal Gale, "Don't Cry Out Loud." That's what we had to listen to. Just keep it inside.
I have a, I have a
Like,
very similar background, so
yeah.
I get that. I totally
Yeah.
get that. I
And
I
it's up to us who've experienced that
right.
to show people, even though I think people are in their feelings a lot more nowadays, they have a better framework for now. We know feelings aren't bad. You have to
Right.
have them.
Right.
But now we have to also come back to the place where we can take those feelings, we can process them, and we can move forward and we can change our actions in accordance with those feelings.
Right.
I think we're
I
we're still kind of on that path.
I heard a psychotherapist, I don't remember what her name was, on a podcast, and she said, "You want your emotions in the car, but you don't want them picking out the music."
Oh my God, exactly. I always say that about ego. I'm like, you want to be friends with your ego, but like tuck her in, put her in the back seat, put a nice blanket over her. Don't let her drive. Like
Right. Don't let
you
her
cannot let
drive.
her drive. So yeah.
Um, well, and what you were saying about, we have these experiences and these backgrounds, and everybody has wounding, and um, but I think it was Rob Bell, who I'm a big fan of, who's spiritual and very funny.
Yeah.
Um, he said the difference between happiness and joy is that happiness was a fleeting feeling, and joy encompasses the whole range of human experience and
Mm.
emotion. And I think
Yeah.
that's a very good, definite,
I
I
love
mean, I'm
that.
paraphrasing, but
Yeah.
something to that
I
effect.
love that. I
And
mean,
that's true. Joy,
yeah.
joy isn't the absence of pain,
Yeah.
right? It's all of it.
Yeah. And joy can be, we have to recognize all of it. We've got to recognize the pain. We've got to recognize the joy as well. And I think we do expect joy to be long lasting. And I've definitely noticed I do this all the time where I feel myself kind of like holding on to the happiness or the joy. I'm like, no, don't go anywhere.
Don't
Don't,
go
I'm not ready.
away.
Don't go away. But, as like I always say to my kids, it's like we're here for the roller coaster ride. We're not
Right.
meant to, it would be no fun if the roller coaster was just going like this
Right.
on one level.
Right.
So no matter what, you're going to experience those lows, but the one constant is that things always change. And that is always true.
Right.
Always going to be true that things will cycle back around. So, no matter where you are, you can't hold on to anything.
Right.
We're not allowed to really do that. You can incorporate it into your beingness, but you have to just look towards your life as more challenges and experiences and more things for you to allow you to grow and to
Right.
become more of your, full capability as a human being and,
Right.
fulfill more of your purpose, whatever it is for each individual.
Right. Sometimes I stand on the fence often between I have a specific purpose that I haven't discovered yet, and on the other side, I've got my only purpose is to just be me.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
don't know, do you vacillate between those two things? Like I have a definitive purpose, or no, really, I'm just supposed to be the best version of myself that I am
Yeah.
granted the grace to be.
Absolutely. I think I was overly focused on what my purpose was for a long time. And I think now when I think about it, it's like my purpose was to experience life in this particular body
Right.
from my particular lineage through all the fucked up shit, you know,
Right. Right.
and to be a gateway for the future. Interesting. I don't really know what that means, but I think I've become less focused on what my purpose is and more focused for me on right now, at least, um, what's the best way to spend the next 2 minutes of my life? Or like
Right. Right.
what's really trying to slow down because I've noticed I've caught myself recently with some practices that I've been doing and some other work that I've been doing, how quickly my brain moves from one thing to another,
Hmm.
um, one piece of stimulation to another, and how I just want to focus on slowing everything down,
Right.
slowing time down into moments on top of moments, and making sure that in each moment, I'm finding my foundation and I'm coming from that stronger place, which was completely broken for the better part of my life.
Right.
I'm coming from a stronger place, but it's almost like I've built a tree on top of this cracked cement of a foundation. And I've built
Mhm.
this tree and the roots have filled through all those cracks. And that tree is growing. Um, and I think for me, the importance of my life as a mom, which is perfect for Divine Feminine,
Mhm.
I've sort of I'm very impressionable and I have been for my whole life. And I was
Mhm.
very much under the idea that, oh, motherhood's not that important, whatever. Everybody can like spit out babies. It's not a big deal. I'm not special. I needed to be special. It's and also like I have a lot of friends who don't have children and
Right.
it's not the happiest sort of subject for them. So it's like I don't really talk about being a mother a lot because
Hmm.
it, it's no one's business. It's my own thing, It's like it's not a
Right.
big deal. But right now now that my kids are teenagers, like it's become it should have always been the number one priority, but it's like they're being able to parent them for these last couple of years that they're still in my house, uh, while I still have them here, being able to just surround them in as much love as possible, which I haven't been able to do, not
Right.
consistently,
Right.
because there's a lot of shit that your kids bring up in you. They're the best reflectors of
Mhm.
your own issues that you need to examine. Um, so coming from a better place in terms as a being a mother to those two for the next how many years? 5, 6 years at least, while they're
Mhm.
still here in my home. That's the main purpose for now. But my
Right.
purposes keep switching, you know?
Right. Right.
And for me, again, I'm a Gemini, and I fully, like I am the ultimate Gemini. Like I'm a Gemini sun, Gemini rising, and I have a Pisces moon. So I'm nuts. Like I am completely nuts. And I am not for this world. Like, you know, it's very difficult for putting me like I am definitely a square peg. I'm not a square peg. I'm like a fucking tetrahedron. I don't know what I am trying to fit into a round. I don't know what I am, but that's okay. I'm only finally accepting all the different shapes that I am because I'm gonna
Right.
change a million times between now and when I transition. So
Right.
um, I my purpose is to see life more clearly and really to help people as much as possible.
Right.
I want to come at that from a place of genuine compassion as opposed to posturing or performatively helping people because I genuinely love everybody. But I unfortunately did that to my own detriment for a very long time. So
Right.
finding that balance where I can move forward into my crone years, which I'm hella looking forward to.
Hmm.
Period, go away. Like I'm fully in perimenopause with teenagers at home. So giving myself the grace as I move into crone and being a graceful, wise teacher as much as I can through that transition.
Right. I feel that way too. I'm going to be 52 this
Oh,
year.
you do
And
not. I mean, I'm just kidding. I hate when people say you don't look that age. I was like, I should because fuck you. We value youth a little too much here. But good. That's amazing. I love it.
it's all that clean living.
Right?
But yeah, I enjoy that. I embrace cronehood. I was very excited to turn 50. I had a full hysterectomy when I was 31, so I haven't had a period for a long time,
Oh,
but best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever
yeah.
did. My only
I
regret
hear
is I
that.
didn't do it sooner.
I hear that from a lot of people. I know there are two people in my life who've had hysterectomies and they're like,
Yeah,
ooh,
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's
So much
amazing.
better. So much better. But I've been gaining weight ever since. So, there's that.
I mean, estrogen, I had this strange hit. Estrogen as a hormone envelops and is the inflammatory energy, and testosterone elongates. Anyway, that was a channel at one point, which I found
Okay.
fascinating. So I'm like, this is what the goddess is supposed to be. The goddess
Right.
is supposed to have that gravity,
Right. Right.
you know.
Well, and the goddess has both masculine and feminine energies, just like we do.
So true.
But
Yeah.
she needs to manifest in the divine feminine at this point in our human history, which I think is happening.
Yeah.
I hope it is.
I hope it
Do
is.
you
I
think it's
think
happening?
I do and I've been I guess in the last, I guess 5, 6, 8 years that since I've been sort of focusing on divine feminine, the part that I was like, I don't know that I want divine feminine to come because it's chaos. It's going to be chaos.
Right.
That's divine feminine destruction. I think we are in that part of divine feminine. I think absolutely divine feminine is rising, but I I don't know that, or I think we have to come to terms with the fact that Earth is shifting and transforming, but that we are meant to transition off of Earth into a non-molecular body, meaning we're all gonna die.
Mhm.
So, like I think like we're always like, oh, we're gonna save it, but I don't I think we're too far past the point. Not to be like a Debbie Downer or anything, but I
Mhm.
don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that the more we can be on a path of compassion and act through love as much as possible and nonviolence, as much as possible. I have like a bug zapper. I've killed all these gnats and I'm like, I'm so violent. Like this is violence right here. And I'm like, sorry that there's an overwhelming amount of gnats right near my window, but and I'm killing them. I am inflicting violence. So the earth is not, I don't think we're going to be here a very, for a very long time. I do think, but I do think we will somehow manifest in a better version of Earth, in a different way. And I don't know what that means yet.
Right,
But that's how I feel. I feel like we are in a destruction area right now.
right,
And I think with divine feminine, we have to embrace that part of divine feminine.
right.
And again, it doesn't mean we can't plant seeds. It doesn't mean we
Mhm.
can't nourish and nurture. If anything, it means we need to do that more so.
Right,
We
right,
can't pull anyone off of their path that they're on, but we can do that for ourselves, again, like building the roots down in our own broken foundations and
right, right,
finding those moments of joy and
right.
slowing life down. um I think that's kind of the way forward, and whether that means, I'm going to go live on a farm and compost and do all those things, which I think is great. um I hope that that happens, but I also don't want to I don't want to get too excited about, you know, things getting better, because I does that make sense?
It
That's a
does.
horrible way to end this podcast. But I also love life and I love earth and I love nature and I love myself and I love meeting people and talking, and that's going to continue. So I'm not sad about it. I think it's
Right. It
an
is what it is.
acceptance. Yeah.
Okay. So we're approaching the top of the hour. I guess I do have one question for you,
Oh,
in addition to the three questions.
yeah.
So do you have a favorite famous traditional comedian?
Hmm. No, my first answer is no.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I've gone from liking different comedians here
Right.
and there that I think are hilarious. I think right now all the comedians that I love are like people that I know. And they're not famous by any means,
Right. I
but
was just curious.
yeah, not
Um,
right now. Yeah.
I was also thinking because comedians have had a hard time with the oversensitivity of our culture in the last few years,
Totally.
maybe they will see sacred comedy and spiritual comedy as something that is safer than all the traditional fodder of comedians, right?
I would love that. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
reaching out to a lot of more famous comedians, but it's we'll see. That is yet to be.
I
We'll
think
see.
that would be interesting. And the thing
Yeah,
about the Earth, I don't know. I mean, who the fuck am I? I don't know what's going to happen,
same,
right? That's
same.
a common refrain of mine is what the fuck do I know? I
Yeah,
could really. I
I
mean,
don't know. I don't know.
but I do I'm choosing to believe the things that I read about how, all these geologists and scientists are like, if you look at the whole history of the planet, this cooling down and heating up is part of a natural cycle, and the Earth's going to be just fine.
Yeah, yeah. I think the Earth is not going anywhere.
Right, right.
That's all
But
I'll
but
say.
it will change.
It
And
will
I've said this
change.
many times this season. Periods of change are always preceded by periods of great chaos.
Yeah.
And that's what we're in now. And something that I heard Jess Reed say recently was because she talks about this evolution of consciousness a lot. And she said, we're moving away from, we're moving toward who am I and away from who do I need to be to survive this.
Totally.
And
Totally.
and and that we're also moving out of this separation consciousness, which we've been in for like, I don't know, 1,000 years,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And spirituality is on the rise, but I do often get dismayed at the saturation of that market, and everybody's an expert and everybody's a teacher, and there's 75,000 new different priestess lineages, and
Yeah.
you got to go to this school and you got to go to that
Yeah.
school, and what they're charging for those things. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Because I
okay,
didn't want to be on that path, so that's why I'm waitressing. Like I'm like I didn't have what it took to be like I'm gonna be as relaxed as possible and be a teacher about wisdom. Oh, I'm gonna like write a million books. I don't have that in me. Fuck no.
right,
I don't have that
right.
in me.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, I don't have it in me to be famous for anything.
yeah,
You
I
know
don't
what I mean? I
yeah.
just don't, the
I
social
just
media promotion alone makes me not want to do that.
Oh, yeah. It's like honestly, I just want to make enough money to like maybe buy a home. Yeah, right. And to maybe help my kids go to college and maybe buy a new car because ours is like almost 20 years old. Like, that's what I want. I don't need to be famous. I want these people who want to be famous, who I believe are amazing and healing. I want them to be famous,
Right,
you
right.
know? Yeah.
I just want to help people on their spiritual path. I feel like one of my many purposes is to help women who are interested in doing so come to the goddess and develop a relationship with the goddess. And
Yeah.
I said on this show a lot, I feel like I've repeated myself a lot this season, but one of the things that I'm trying to focus more on is that with goddess spirituality and feminist spirituality and women's spirituality kind of all running neck and neck, to me, there's so much emphasis on self-empowerment, which we need, right, to get out from under the lash of patriarchy. But I feel like the spirituality piece of it and my connection to a divine being gets lost in that mix,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I try and teach people, you know, we're not really out here all alone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you talk about the army of people and ancestors and spirit guides,
Yeah.
you have the power that creates worlds at your back
Yeah.
all the
It's
time,
so true.
all
You
the
know,
time.
I did a journey recently, and what came through that I started speaking and that I've been saying ever since, I basically during the journey, and I would like all of your listeners to do this right now, is
Okay.
to just give yourself a hug, right? Like take your one arm, wrap it around the opposite shoulder, and the other arm, really hold yourself tight and almost close your eyes, put your head down into your chest and say, or just say it out loud, I embrace myself as the universe embraces me. And it's like, you got your back. The universe got your back too, you
Right,
know?
right,
But it's first and then all.
right, right,
Yeah. I embrace myself as the universe embraces me.
right.
Yeah.
Because, well, and love is a two-way street between us and the universe,
Absolutely.
right?
It is a faucet that you can turn on and off.
Right,
We don't realize that we've turned all of our faucets off,
right,
but it doesn't stop the water doesn't stop flowing.
right,
We just
right.
have to
And then we've
open.
created a dam, and then we get wet, and
Exactly.
then we wonder what happened.
Then we're flooded. That's like another psychological term. But yeah, exactly.
Then boom, existential
Boom.
crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep it a steady flow. Keep the
Right,
steady flow
right,
and recognize that you're the one, tightening it or loosening it.
right.
Um, Consciously or
Or
unconsciously.
unconsciously, right.
Yeah. Water
Okay.
break. Speaking of which.
Um, anything that we didn't get to talk about that you want to talk about?
No, I'm really honored to be on here. I know it was hard, the scheduling wise, but
It's all
I'm
right.
really honored to be here. And I just want to give a big shout out to Karen McGrandle at the Divine
Yeah.
Feminine app
Yes.
for putting us in each other's orbit. She's
Yes.
just doing such amazing things there, and everybody become a member. There's things happening all over the place. And maybe
Absolutely.
we'll be fine because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Maybe we
Yeah.
will. Maybe it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
Just maybe.
Yeah, but it's gonna have to start embracing yourself first.
Right.
We can't fix the world.
Right.
We can embrace ourselves, and then we can work with other people who are also embracing themselves.
Right.
And then we get stronger that way.
Right. I'm never sure which comes first. It's a chicken or egg thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
does loving myself help me to love other people better, or just loving other people more help me to love myself more? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, right? Doesn't
I
matter which
think
came
it's
first.
they're both true at different times.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we can't be on the spiritual mountaintop all the time.
Exactly. And there are times I'm sure you've helped people and they've been like, that changed my entire life. And you were like, I was having a really shitty day that day. I don't know where you got that from. Like you're not perceptive at all. So
Right.
you never know when you're affecting people that way. And
Right.
you might not even have that intention to, but it
Right.
works. So
Right.
there's a magic, there's a plan in all of it.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
So, Jennifer, at the end of every show, I ask all the new guests the same three questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
So, first question, tell me something about yourself that people who know you or don't know you so well would be surprised to learn.
I'm really boring.
I find that incredibly difficult to believe.
I'm so boring. I can hermit and be very boring. Yeah.
If you say it, it must be true.
It's
Nothing about you says boring.
I know what I tried very hard for a long time in my life to build that impression up. But in my core, I'm pretty boring. Like I just want to go for a nice walk, eat a nice breakfast, have some coffee. I'm good. Put out a couple of podcasts, pretty boring.
Okay. Uh, so the next question is, what is your current favorite TV series or movie?
I'm so embarrassed to say right now, favorite might not be the right word, but I've been watching Love is Blind. And it's
Let's call that
embarrassing.
let's call that guilty pleasure.
It's a guilty pleasure, but it's so illuminating in so many ways about the current state of humanity and the human condition and uh just how in like denial people are about themselves. It's useful. Anyway.
Useful. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I keep meaning to watch Jewish matchmaking.
I've seen that. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not, I might be Jewish, but I'm definitely not in the Jewish world. My husband's Chinese, American born Chinese. So I
Okay.
live in like a Chinese household right now, which is good because we all eat Chinese food on Christmas. So
Nice. Nice. Okay. And the
yeah.
final question is, if your life were a movie,
Hmm.
what would be the theme song on the soundtrack?
Oh, this is gonna take a sec. Thanks to the magic of editing. The theme song on the soundtrack. You're the one that I want. Oh my God, that's the only song that comes up from Greece. Because it's like I've been trying to escape myself for so long. And it's like, no, you're the one that I want. You're the one that I want. I'm pointing to myself right
That is perfect.
now. Oh
It
God.
really is.
Yeah, I've been
So,
trying to woo myself forever. So that would be the culminated in a movie. Yeah.
um, yeah, that's perfect. As you can imagine, we've had just such a wide variety of answers. So there is a public playlist on Spotify and iTunes, but I think I only have the first three seasons up or the first two and a half seasons. So I have to add to it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I have to find somebody on Apple who has an iPhone to do it for me because I'm an Android person.
Oh yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
have iTunes. So,
Yeah.
but
That's
I'll
awesome.
I'll rope somebody into that. Maybe one of
Yeah.
those college age interns
Oh
can
my
do
God.
that
There
for
you
me. Or,
go. We can
here,
do
put up
that.
this public playlist
Hell yeah.
on your iTunes account that the whole world can access. Um,
That's awesome.
so, all right, Jennifer. Well, I'm going to do that rude thing that Zoom does, and the screen's just going to go blank, and I'm going to disappear. Um, but I will be in touch. Thank you so much for coming on the
Oh, you're
show.
so welcome.
This was really enjoyable. I feel like you're somebody I could probably sit and talk to for hours,
Same.
and I'm still 4 seasons in. I'm still amazed that I just reach out to strangers and I'm like, "Hey, so I have this podcast. It's about the divine feminine and spirituality. I love the goddess. I like to talk to other people who love the goddess. Do you want to come on the show?" And without fail, people are like, "Sure. That sounds like fun."
Absolutely. And that's proof enough that what you're doing is you're in the like you're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. Like
Right.
this show needs to happen. And I had so much fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and
Thank you. You too.
until we meet again, may the
Yes.
love and the peace of the goddess be with you.
Thank you.
All right. Talk soon.
Bye.
Thanks for watching or listening to The Girlfriend God. Don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, follow, and comment. Episodes drop every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you can follow The Girlfriend God on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.